You look different.
It's all nanotech. It's a bunch of stuff even Ito hasn't figured out yet.
So are you stronger than you were?
Yeah, and faster too.
For the people who went to see the motion picture Alita Battle Angel, one of the joyous occasions in the movie was when they saw Alita recover from a severe injury and receive a tremendous power-up due to receiving a body called the Berserker Body. And I think I will be safe to say that within all of the different technologies that were shown in the motion picture, this is one of the more memorable ones to the audience. It has a tremendous amount of power, and it has some very unique technologies. And one of the questions that of course comes up to the viewers is, I wonder if this will truly become a real body in the future. Will science be able to catch up to the levels that such a body will become possible in the years to come? So what's up, people, and welcome to another Alita Battle Angel video. And for today, I would like to go off topic and not talk about the lore or the story or any of that, but instead talk about the science. And for this episode, I would like to focus on the Berserker Body with that question: do you think that technology will eventually get to the point where such a body will be possible? And of course, to be able to determine that, instead of looking at the future, one should look at the present and determine if there are foundation technologies that exist today that potentially can give clues to the possibilities of having a body like this in the future. And now, before I begin, I would like to give my standard spoiler alert. If you have not watched the movie Alita Battle Angel and you don't want to be spoiled by any of the storyline, then I would suggest that you turn off this video. But for anybody who has seen the movie or who wants to talk about this specific technology, then yeah, please join us. And with that, that is my short spoiler alert. And as always, please watch at your discretion. Okay, so the Berserker Body. You know, as much as I enjoyed Alita's original body, the doll body in the movie because of its beautiful design, there was something so satisfying when you saw her in the Berserker Body. And that's probably because you knew that every component of her capabilities basically increased with the utilization of that body. That body was basically designed for her Panzerkunst skills, and you knew that the moment she got that body, a lot of her problems that she had in the past went away because of the body's capabilities. And of the three mediums to which Alita came out, the comic, the anime, and the movie, I have to admit, I really like the movie's Berserker Body the most as far as look and feel is concerned. It had the most organic sort of design with muscle tissues and basically human anatomical features. You know, it looked like a body, right? A real body. And if there was any comic body similar to that, it would be the Imaginos body, right? And so this was a very intricate body that we saw in the movie. And as we know, there were 4 major capabilities that got enhanced when she got her Berserker Body. The first one, of course, is obvious. It was her enhanced strength, speed, and agility. All of her motor functions basically went up the moment she got her Berserker Body, and for once, she was able to stay up with her Panzerkunst skills. This was a body designed to be able to take on the rigors of Panzerkunst, and Alita's capabilities, of course, got upgraded during that time. Now, the other 3 are the plasma generation, the nanomachine operation, and the antimatter reactor. And of course, of the 3, the antimatter reactor is one that's quite unique to the movie. It wasn't something that you saw in the comic. But I do want to talk about the body that came out in the movie, so I want to put that into the discussion as well. And so now we come back to the present day, and are there research going on? What is the research that we see currently that potentially can indicate that there may be a body like this in the future. And so this isn't anything special. All I did is just roam around in the internet and see what I can find. And so I thought I would bring it up here. So there's nothing really groundbreaking in the things that I found. It's something that anybody could find if they wanted to look for it. But I did want to go over it and talk about a few things here because, as always, I do want to hear from you guys with regards to the discussions. Okay, so with respect to the first topic of enhanced agility, speed, and strength, of course, the current technology is finally getting to the point of advanced robotics, where you could now create limbs that have very sophisticated movements. Many of these limbs are now able to do 6 degrees of freedom, which basically can go radially in and out, forwards and backwards, and of course, angularly, rotating counterclockwise and clockwise. And by doing that, you get a significant amount of freedom that is typically similar to what you may have in the human arm. So we're getting to the point where the mechanical limbs can be designed to duplicate what you have as human arms. The question is then how do you control it? That is the big question, the biofeedback. And finally, it seems to be getting to the point where many of the advanced research is looking into neural control of the mechanical motion. So the motors and the sensors are connected to supposedly neural tissue so that it can actually send the signals back and forth to and from the brain. And of course, the industry that pioneers a lot of this technology is the military. And in the United States, for example, DARPA is looking into funding and developing very advanced robotic arms that can be used for the military. Also, France has given a green light to go ahead and develop bionic or cybernetic support functions for the soldiers. So whether that starts out with an exoskeleton or limbs will depend upon the situation that you want to look at it. If you want to enhance a person, you probably won't start out with a total replacement body like a cyborg that you see Alita as in the movie. What you may start out with is certain implants that may help augment the capabilities of a human soldier. Something that might, for example, give a soldier night vision, or something that may help a soldier see better, strengthen their arms a little bit more through exoskeletons that may eventually become a permanent part of the body, depending upon how much adaptability and acceptance there is in the society. Now, for the people who have lost limbs, it's a different matter because they have already lost limbs. There is no need for replacement because of the fact that they no longer have the limbs that they originally had. And so for them, a true complete functional limb would be favorable. And for that, once again, arm or a leg that has a total 6 degrees of freedom, and the neurosensors that can provide that sort of feedback can provide the capabilities that a person may have lost if they have lost a limb. The challenge will be in finding the proper feedback control that will give the accuracy, the strength, the speed of a human minimally so that they can do the detailed, intricate motor functions that they typically would do with the arm and the leg. But of course, if you can synthetically improve on the accuracy, the feedback speed, or the strength, then you may be able to find a limb that can go beyond what is typically seen in a human body. Now, beyond that point is, of course, what we see in Alita's Berserker Body, which is that techno-organic design of the arm and the legs. And for that, artificial synthetic muscle fiber that can mimic the mechanical capabilities of a muscle. Of course, a muscle is a cell that changes its volumetric structure depending upon the signals that it receives from the nerves. And so, of course, there are synthetic equivalents of materials that can change their structures based upon electrical stimulation, for example. A typical one is something like a piezoelectric material that will actually literally stretch or contract based upon whether you put in an electric signal or not. So if you put in a voltage signal, it may actually stretch. and then if you take it away, it will contract. Well, depending upon how you use it, these piezoelectrics can actually be used for mechanical functions. And in fact, in nanotechnologies, they are used to motorize certain areas that need to be moved in a microscopic manner. They will literally walk across the surface of a material using that piezoelectric to stretch and contract like an inchworm. However, recent science has gone one step further to see more organic sort of materials, things that may be able to replace muscle fiber in the future and still have that elongation contraction sort of capability. And one such research is being conducted by the University of Colorado Boulder in a project called HASEL, where they are looking into artificial muscle fibers that not only are capable of functioning like the human muscle, but they seem to be stronger than the human muscle, and they may actually even have the ability to heal, recover from a tearing incident, for example. And these sorts of materials provide the opportunity for the design of an artificial muscle cell. And if that is possible and they can make the control mechanisms and the cell in a microscopic manner, then they may be able to mimic a true full muscle in a human limb, in which case you still may have your natural bones. You still may have all the other muscles except the one that you may have received injury on. And that part may eventually be replaced by an artificial muscle that is controlled by your nervous system. But it may end up being stronger and faster than your natural muscle system, which will be interesting because if it is just one muscle in the group, they probably will have to dumb it down because it may actually cause an imbalance in the limb. But of course, if this gets accepted and it continues to grow where certain muscle sets eventually get replaced depending upon medical injury, then eventually there may be various people walking around having these artificial muscles the way people have titanium bone transplants, places where they had to remove bone tissue and they had replaced it with titanium parts. So the first acceptance of cybernetics probably won't be something like you see in Cyborg of the Justice League or Alita as a total replacement cyborg, but will be a lot more invisible and maybe just one part of the human anatomy that they're replacing. If that becomes acceptable and if that starts growing into being an accepted factor, the same way that we accept glasses now, or we accept tooth fillings, or we accept titanium parts in our bone tissue, then it may actually grow to the point where a whole limb will eventually be replaced by an artificial techno-organic material that looks similar to the human muscle fibers, but is significantly stronger and has faster feedback and is more accurate than the human limb. And if that happens, then of course we are on our way towards eventually getting to a total replacement cyborg. And if that's the case, somebody like Alita with her Berserker body is not completely out of the question. Now, another technology that received serious attention in the movie was, of course, the nanotechnology that's in her Berserker body. And for anybody who's read the comic, you know that the Berserker body is very special because of the Berserker cells, which are nanotechnology cyber biological cells that can adapt to any of the cells in the body and can repair and become part of whatever component that is needed in the body. And this, of course, requires a tremendous amount of nanotechnology as well as a tremendous amount of microbiology. And it's the combination of the two that actually gives the Berserker body its special capability. And we, of course, saw it two ways in the movie. One was when the body actually adapted to Alita's image of herself and changed the body's structure to meet her image. The other time was when the body actually repaired an injury that she received from Gruishka's grind cutters and completely healed herself in an instant. So now we think about it and go, okay, it's very nice to be able to have little tiny machines that are running around in your body helping repair it. But what does that exactly mean? Well, nanotechnology research has been going on for quite a while now, and there has been several advances going in the area of physiology. However, when we talk about nanomachines, in this case, they are not little tiny robots that are running around in your body with arms and legs and wheels and gears and all this. No, they literally look like chemical compounds, but they will act according to very specific requirements and can do specific functions in the body. One of the biggest research that's going on right now is in the elimination of cancer cells in your body by using these nanotechnology to go after specific cancer cells and destroy them. And this goes beyond what you see currently, which is radiation therapy or chemotherapy, where they also destroy the cancer cells, but in that case, it's a shotgun approach. They destroy the cancer cells by literally going in and destroying a good majority of the cells in your body, which is why chemotherapy and radiotherapy is so destructive to the body. And so you have to be in a reasonably good physical shape, even if you have cancer, to receive that sort of treatment. Because if you aren't, the chemotherapy or the radiotherapy may actually kill you just as much as the cancer will. But in the case of nanotechnology, what their objective is that this little package of poison, if you will, to the cancer cell will actually flow into the body. The container that the poison is in will protect the body from that poison until it actually comes to the cancer cell. And once it finds it, it will release that poison and destroy only that cell. And the way that happens is typically all of these cells have certain receptors on them. And each one of these receptors have a very specific signature. So a cancer cell has its own signature receptors. Knowing what those receptors are, they will put the other side of those receptors onto that nanotechnology material, the nanocell, if you will, so that when it goes flowing into the body, it will avoid all the other cells because it doesn't have the appropriate receptor, and it will target the cancer cells when it finds that the receptors on the nanocell can actually attach to the receptor on the cancer cell. And by doing that, it preferentially attacks the cancer cell, and once those receptors are in, it will trigger a signal to actually break apart that container and release the poison. And by doing so, you can surgically strike a cancer cell in the body while avoiding all the other healthy cells in your body. And so this is a little nanotechnology. It's not what you think in terms of it doesn't look like a machine with wheels and gears and motors and all of that, but it is a microscopic structure that is used to do some sort of function. And as such, it is a machine. And because it is small, I'm not sure if it's nanometer size small, but it is small enough that people can call it a nanotechnology. And so if in the future more complex machines or technology can come out where the nanocells not only do that sort of function, but can perform other functions as well, then they may be able to go in and start controlling the body the way science wants it to. So you could think of the Berserker cell as the cybernetic equivalent of the stem cell, right? The stem cell is the original parent cell that can eventually evolve and turn into the other types of cells. This is a stem cell on steroids in the sense that this can literally fix your body in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. And so we're talking about repairs that go far, far faster than what the human body can do. But it does a similar sort of function. And so if the body is to have such nanotechnology, the other technology that is coming up is, of course, additive manufacturing. Basically, manufacturing of material from its base constituents. This is different from the old style machining, which is called subtractive manufacturing. In the old days, machines were made by taking a big chunk of material, whether it's like metal or wood, and using a lathe or a mill or a drill or whatever, they would start taking layers away from the material until it becomes the proper shape that they were hoping for. That is subtractive manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is, of course, taking the base material and actually growing it into the shape that you need. And in the biology side, one of the most commonly used form of additive manufacturing is, of course, the process of polymerization, where small molecules called monomers are combined together to create a much more complex molecule called a polymer. And so this is the chemistry's version of additive manufacturing. And in the biology world, especially in the genetics side, one of the most common techniques of polymerization is the polymerase chain reaction, or the PCR technique. And in this case, the base constituent is a DNA strand, and the idea is to rapidly multiply that strand by continuously cloning it over and over again. As you know, a DNA strand is a double helix shaped like a ladder. And so the first thing you do is to crack it, or to denature it, or to split it down the middle. And by doing so, you have two individual constituents. From there, then you take a seed molecule, often called a primer, and you attach it to the other side of the split pair. And when that happens, an enzyme called Tech polymerase will then continue to grow that seed or primer into a complete DNA structure once more. Then the entire process can be repeated again, where you once more crack the DNA into its two sides, and then attach a primer once more, and then go through that process once again. If you keep on doing that, then you double the quantity each cycle. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. After a numerous number of cycles, you will have a tremendous number of the identical DNA strands if the chain reaction went properly. And so this is an exponential growth of a genetic material, and shows how additive manufacturing can be very efficient in producing genetic material. However, in the case of the Berserker Body, we are not just building a DNA strand, we are building a whole Berserker cell. But what that means is that there needs to be somewhere in Alita's body the incubator, basically something that will do a much more complex version of PCR by constantly cloning and reproducing the Berserker cell, so that if something happens to her body, those cells can be immediately released to repair whatever damage she received. And so in the Alita Battle Angel universe, the additive manufacturing capability has advanced so much that she can literally clone parts of herself constantly, using whatever incubation techniques and nanotechnology techniques she has inherent in her Berserker body. And because she is powered by an antimatter reactor, she has unlimited amount of energy to be able to continuously power up that incubator and constantly clone these Berserker cells, so that she will have a never-ending supply of this material. And that is one of the reasons why the Berserker Body is so powerful, and in the wrong hands can be so terrifying. And of course, that does bring us to the next topic of the antimatter reactor. So a matter-antimatter reaction is considered to be one of the most efficient and highest forms of energy production when a matter is turned into energy. And of course, this comes from the famous equation that is often associated with Einstein, which is the rest mass energy equation, E equals mc squared. And this basically is the equation that relates the energy that a material can produce based upon its mass, which is m. So the E is the energy that is produced, m is the mass of the material, and the c is the speed of light. And since you're taking the square of c, it's a very large number. What this means is that even a small amount of material, if converted completely into energy, you can get a tremendous amount of energy out of it. And since the matter-antimatter reaction is one of the most efficient forms of energy transformation from matter, this is one of the forms that people consider to be a holy grail in being able to produce a tremendous amount of energy from a small amount of material. Of course, antimatter is something that is still in the legends and in the fairy tales, and that it doesn't really exist in our world, not in the way that we can take advantage of it. But it basically is a model that considers taking the transformation of matter and converting it into pure energy. And so you can understand why Dyson Needle tells Alita that her heart can power up all of Iron City for many, many years because of its highly efficient matter-to-energy transfer methodology. So then if we compare it to the current technology, what are the forms of nuclear mass transformation to energy? Probably the most famous one in the current era is nuclear fission. That is the taking of extremely large unstable material like uranium or plutonium and breaking it down into smaller material. And when that happens, of course, there is a release of energy at the atomic scale. This is different from the combustion of oil or combustion of natural gas or the combustion of coal, in that those are taken in a much larger breakdown than the atomic level. Here, of course, in nuclear fission, you are breaking it down in the atoms. And because of that, since it's a much smaller material, you're getting a much more efficient energy transfer. And because of that, for the small amount of materials, you get a tremendous amount of energy. This, of course, is most observed if you look at any sort of nuclear weapon, where a tremendous amount of energy is instantly released. And of course, that is what makes atomic bombs and nuclear weapons so devastating. But of course, if you control that release of energy in a much more smaller scale, then you could leverage that reaction for a much more productive form of energy generation. And so nuclear fission turns out to be a very economical way of creating energy. But of course, the downside are all the negative aspects. The creation of nuclear waste that is very difficult to get rid of. And of course, if you lose control of that reaction and don't have adequate cooling, then you could have a thermal runaway, which will create eventually a meltdown, as we saw in 3 Mile Island, in Chernobyl, and most recently in Fukushima. And so there is a tremendous amount of risk associated with using nuclear reaction for energy. However, the gain in energy is so high, this form of reaction is still used. However, recently, science has advanced the form that a different sort of nuclear reaction is now being considered, and that is nuclear fusion. Now, this has been going on since the early 60s, and here, instead of splitting the atom, it is actually combining two elements to form a larger one. And when you do that, you also can release energy. This is actually the form of reaction that occurs in the sun. In addition, unlike nuclear fission, nuclear fusion actually has minimal negative effects. It doesn't have the problems of nuclear waste, since its fuel, unlike uranium for nuclear fission, is deuterium and tritium, two separate isotopes of water. So you could think of water as being the fuel for nuclear fusion. And the byproduct that comes out is helium, which is a very benign element. And so it's a much more cleaner reaction than nuclear fusion, and because of that, it's a lot better for the environment. In addition, since nuclear fusion basically shuts down if there's any sort of problem rather than creating a meltdown, you don't have to worry about a significant amount of risks that may happen if you lose control of the reaction. Basically, the reaction will stop and you won't have any sort of environmental or health issues. And so nuclear fusion turns out to be a very good source of clean energy generation. And scientists have been continuing to develop this to see if they could actually make this work. The difficulty is creating the environment suitable for nuclear fusion reaction to occur. And for that, you basically have to create the environment similar to the sun, a really high temperature, high pressure environment. And that is very difficult to do. And what has happened is that the amount of energy necessary to create that environment turns out so far to be greater than the amount of energy that you get out. So what they call a net negative energy situation. And that's why, although they have created nuclear fusion reactions on Earth, they have never been able to create what they call an energy positive reaction. Until recently. And right now, 35 countries have budgeted $55 billion to develop the first energy positive nuclear reactor. This project is called the ITER program, or the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, and it is being currently built in the country of France. And if this succeeds, then this will be the first fusion reactor that will be able to produce more energy than use, and it will open the doors for possibly providing a greater, cleaner form of energy. But what is more exciting is there are now commercial entities that are going into the development of commercial fusion reactors. And the goal of these companies is not just to get a net energy positive reaction, but also to do it in a much more compact and economic manner. And there are several companies around the world that are trying to develop these compact economical fusion reactors, and some of them utilize the similar magnetic confinement reaction that is being developed by ITER, but others are also looking into inertial fusion reaction and a combination hybrid of magnetic confinement and inertial reaction. And I will leave a link to many of these companies' videos that are in YouTube so that you could take a look at these new technologies. And the great thing is, if any one of these companies do succeed, there will be a revolution in terms of how the world utilizes its energy, because there will be a greater amount of clean energy available to the world. And although it won't even come close to the antimatter engine that Alita has in her Berserker Body, it is one step forward towards getting closer to that sort of reaction. Okay, so with that said, there is the final technology, which I left for last because I do not find too much in terms of this area, and that is the plasma generation within the cybernetic body. And in fact, this is relatively the easiest technology out of the ones that we talked about, because of the fact that, plasma generation or plasma cutting already exists. It is often used in manufacturing as a miniature form of very clean cutting technology. However, you don't see it in the form of a cybernetic appendage because most likely cybernetic appendages are still in its infancy, and although the technology of plasma generation in a compact form exists already, there really is no real need that the world is aware of to have somebody produce plasma jets out of their fingertips. And so probably, even though this technology may be possible even now, nobody really has had any motive to create it. So the basic concept of a plasma jet is relatively straightforward. You need to have a very high velocity, high pressurized carrier gas that passes through an anode and a cathode that's separated by voltage, a potential difference, if you will. And with a high enough voltage, there will be an arcing across the anode and the cathode, and that arcing will actually energize the carrier gas. And if the energy is absorbed as heat, then it will increase the temperature of the gas. And if it's absorbed into electricity, then it will put a charge onto the gas. And in any case, this energized particle will then be ejected from that nozzle in a high velocity, which will create the plasma jet. Now, as far as the type of gas that is used, it can be anything from hydrogen to oxygen to argon to nitrogen. And so many of these gases naturally occur in the air. And so in one possibility is to actually just draw in compressed air and pass it through. And with a high enough voltage across the anode and the cathode, you will be able to energize that gas and bring it out as plasma. And so if you look at the Alita Battle Angel movie, of course you remember that Alita's Berserker Body had these gas inlets in her arm. And that is, of course, the place where she supposedly takes in the gas to be used for plasma. And then it ejects out of her fingers as a charged electrical plasma, as we saw when she energized her Damascus blade. And so this is a relatively straightforward sort of design. And as far as the concept is concerned, even in current technology, that is possible. The important thing is the amount of energy that comes out. For her to be able to cut with such high intensity through her fingers, she would have to be able to bring out a plasma energy that is extremely high. And so if she wants her fingers to be like little tiny lightsabers, then she will need a tremendous flow of carrier gas along with a very high voltage coming across the cathode and the anode so that you can actually energize that flowing gas with a tremendous amount of energy. And that will be the difficult part, is to be able to have such a small plasma device and be able to discharge that gas. But it can be done, and can be done in a relatively portable manner. And one of the examples of that is by a YouTuber named Hacksmith Industries, who took the plasma technology and made it into a portable device that looked like a lightsaber. It had to have enough flow and enough charge to be able to create a plasma jet that resembled the blade of the lightsaber. And so this, of course, gives a real-life example that has created a portable version of a plasma blade. And so if Alita can bring out similar sorts of flow and similar sorts of charge from a smaller appendage like a fingertip, then she should be able to create a similar sort of plasma blade out of her fingers. And so this is a relatively standard technology compared to a lot of the other technologies we talked about. And the only reason we probably don't see something like this in real life is because there really isn't a need for a person to be able to eject plasma energy from their fingertips, especially if it is a cybernetic arm. And so it might come in the future if somebody wants to go into the industrial situation and use their cybernetic arms to work on material cutting. But it will probably require first the development of the cybernetic arms, and then somebody to realize that yes, you could turn it into a profitable industry by creating this sort of appendage. And if that happens, then yeah, the current technology may be able to support that sort of product. But until then, yeah, we could always watch the movie and be in awe by this sort of capability in the Berserker Body. And so that basically wraps it up for this video. I apologize for the length once again. And whenever I look into these sorts of things, I get carried away because this sort of thing is very interesting. And I know there has been other videos with regards to the technology that comes out in the Alita Battle Angel Alita universe. Two of them, for example, were from the Alita Army, the Radio Chaos podcast. One of them was with regards to the space elevator. Another one was with regards to the basic technologies in the 26th century. And so I'll leave a link to both of those podcasts. If you're interested, yeah, go take a look at them. But in any case, thank you very much for watching. I'll continue to make more Alita Battle Angel Alita Gunmu videos in the future. I hope you join me at that time. And until then, happy technology seeking, and as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.